Aaron,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Okay, thank you. Sean,
Here.
Aaron, Aaron, Carla,
Here.
John.
Here.
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so we'll continue the meeting with public comment is going to be, again, utilizing the chat function. We'll respond to public comment on agenda items at that time and any other items that are on the agenda at the end of the meeting. We'll have a consent agenda, reports, and then we'll vote on the FY22 budget. And followed by that, we'll have a winter hybrid update and then future business discussion. So hearing that, so it's reports. Do we have any staff reports tonight?
We do not, Chuck.
Okay. Committee reports. Tom? I'm sorry, Bridget. Is Bridget here?
No.
Oh, okay, Tom?
No, I think what my report would be, we'll talk about a little bit later from a scheduling
Yeah.
perspective, so no.
Carla?
No report.
Sean?
No report.
John?
No report.
And Aaron? No.
No.
Okay, and Chuck doesn't have a report. Okay, so now we'll go to the budget discussion. Dr. Doherty, or did we want to have a motion first?
Do you want to do the budget, the consent agenda motion first, Chuck?
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Yeah, consent agenda. Yeah.
Okay, so I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Carla?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Okay, now we'll have a motion on the budget and then we'll have discussion after that.
Sure. Move to approve the FY22 superintendent's recommended budget of $49,695,998.
For a second.
Second.
Okay, I'll open it up for John. Did you or Gail want to make any comments?
Just some opening remarks. Again, I just want to thank the committee for all of their questions and work listening to the presentations. We are, after tonight, we will be working on any of the adjustments, and we will have to make some adjustments based on what we presented to you. Doesn't change the bottom line, but we will have to make some adjustments based on what we presented to you last Thursday night. But I also want to thank the work that Gail and her team did in putting this budget together and in the changes that are being made to the budget book based on the discussion that we had on Thursday night.
Okay, thank you. Gail, did you have anything? Or? You're on mute.
I wasn't on mute. No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to just, first of all, I thank you, John. I'd like to thank you and Gail and Chris and Jen and all the staff that worked to put this together. I think it's a very, thoughtful and responsible budget that addresses needs and continues to do what's best for the children of Reading. So thank you for that, and I will be supporting this budget. Is there anyone else? Okay, so we'll have a roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And Chuck, aye. Wow, that was the quickest budget vote in all of my years.
Do I get to say thank you now? I didn't do it too
Yeah.
early this time. So we will let the town manager know tonight the bottom line budget that was approved. And then we will be preparing the revised budget book to send out to the members of Finance Committee. And we will make sure we get you guys a copy of it ahead of that as well. That will reflect, I would say, a black line version, but the changes we made virtually impact every table, every section of the book. So I will plan on sending a clean version of the book out to you guys, hopefully by the end of the week.
And I owe you something
Yes.
too.
I was
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say after we received the school committee chair's opening message. I committed you to by the end of the week.
Thank you. We appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have the, do you want to do the hybrid update?
Sure. So I'm going to try not to repeat myself because I just made some presentation on Thursday. So a lot hasn't changed in some areas. So I'm going to focus more on some of the things that we didn't talk about in as much detail on Thursday. So first, just a quick update. As of this morning, the number of cases that we've had last week and then over the weekend, we did have a few more cases. Fortunately, we've not had a lot of in-person cases. They've been remote. So we've had no quarantining or major quarantining numbers of students. You can see that not much has changed since Thursday. We had an additional staff member and 3 additional elementary students and 1 additional high school student since Thursday. And then this is the total number of cases, which include the numbers that I've just presented to you. This is since September when school opened. I do want to spend a little bit of time to talk about pool testing. We have a little bit more information. So I just want to give you the information as we go along. We hope that we'll be able to start this in the next 3 weeks or so. One of the things that is working in parallel to this, as Mrs. Dowd mentioned last week, is our vaccination program that we're working very closely with the town and the incident command team on. It does require the same staff members, so the bandwidth, we've got to make sure that we have adequate bandwidth to do both at the same time, and both are obviously equally important. I guess you could say that vaccination would actually be more important, but the testing is very important, and it's one of the mitigation strategies that we would like to add to all of the ones that you see here that we are currently doing in our school district. And so pool testing is not the be all end all, but it is another mitigation strategy that we want to use for surveillance and screening of staff and students that may be asymptomatic. And so what the state is offering until March 28th is that they will support financially and from a personnel standpoint, the test kits, the test service provider, the testing software at no cost. After March 28th, we would need to seek our own funding source. Hopefully we'll know more about stimulus funding at that point, and we'll be able to use some of that funding to continue the testing. But the state has committed until March 28th to provide the resources necessary to do the pool testing for staff and students. So just again, quickly how this works. A pooled testing involves taking about 10 to 25 samples. It'll be a swab, and then they're put into a batch, which are then tested using the PCR test, which is takes a little bit longer than the BIMAX test, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And so it's a short swab, and we get the results in about 24 to 48 hours. I will tell you that depending on the testing company, some of the samples are up to 10, some are 10 to 25. So depending on the company that we get assigned to is going to depend how many samples we can put in a pool, which would impact how we break it down by classroom, satellite classroom, cohort. These samples administered by trained school staff. They do recommend that students in grades 3 and above can do their own sample. Pre-K to 2 would need to be done by a trained staff member. So if the pool test result is negative, then all the individuals are going to be presumed negative and they may remain in school. If a pool test result is positive, then all of those individuals will get individual testing, which is called reflex testing. For this portion, we would be using what is called the BINAX Now, which is a rapid antigen test, and we actually would find out the results of that test in 15 minutes from the time that it is administered. So ideally, the way we would want this to work is that we would give the test on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, get the 48-hour results, do the reflex testing with the BIMAX on Friday, and this would all be done during the in-person week of when a student or staff member is in school. So with the BINAX Now, I did do a study, which I just want to briefly go over to show you the accuracy of it, even though it is a rapid test. So what they did is they did a study, drive-through testing in Lawrence, Mass. They looked at symptomatic and asymptomatic individuals. They looked at children and adults, and what they discovered in that result is that it had, for both the symptomatic and the asymptomatic, had a very high return rate and accuracy for children with varying viral loads, particularly high viral and moderate viral, that it had a very high accuracy. When this is done in conjunction with the PCR test, in the pooled testing, that is when it is most effective, which is why DPH and DESE are recommending this method. And I think I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, John. I was just wanted to follow up on something right as you were saying it there, that the reflex testing you mentioned, we would try to do that on the Friday that the children are in school. The only problem, I think, is that most children are not in school on Friday. So would that potentially be maybe done, Thursday before they leave? Or, I'm just thinking the logistics of potentially getting all the kids that hit this pool positive to get back in for testing on Friday when they're not even in school normally on Friday, and then they would be missing classes online might be a challenge.
So, so first, we're hoping that we're not talking about a lot of students. We're talking about maybe 3 to what other school districts are seeing, and Mary Juliana has gone and actually visited school districts doing this in person along with some of the other nurses. They're usually getting, on average, 2 to 3 pools coming back positive. So you're talking approximately 30 tests that would need to be done on a Friday. In order to do this on a Thursday, we would need to actually do the test maybe as early as Monday, which may defeat the purpose of doing the test that early in the week. So that was the whole rationale. We're hoping that we're not talking about a large number of students that would need to get retested.
Okay, so I think I agree with that from a hope perspective. I guess the question I still have is the logistics of it in terms of that pool, and what do we do if the logistics include a student or set of students from Boston? Are we going to, send people to Boston to help with the reflex testing if they wouldn't be taking a bus that day, or how do we help for those the equity side of that testing? Is I guess where I'm
Yeah,
going with
no,
the
that's a
question.
great question, and we would certainly have to make the arrangements to get that done.
Okay. I think the other question to answer that we'll work through and would be making sure that parents are able to bring their child in that day when they were planning to not have to worry about going back and forth to school. I think this is a good thing. I just think there's some logistics to iron out. So I appreciate the time and effort the team's putting on it. But the logistics are always the challenge, right? So
Absolutely.
Sean?
John, I had the same initial reaction that Tom did. And could you expand on your comment that doing it early in the week defeats the purpose?
So if we do the test on, say, a Monday, we get the results, we hope by Wednesday, if it's a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. You would then have to figure out a way to get the testing done for that 36 students or so. The nursing staff is more available on Friday than it is on a Thursday because there are other students that are going to need the services of our nursing staff. So the reason of using Friday is that our nurses are more available on Fridays because we do not have a lot of students in person.
Okay. So, okay. Okay.
All right. Oh, all set, Sean?
Kind of. I'll let it go for now. I need to chew on that because that feels like a solvable problem, but I'm trying not to overstep our bounds here. So
Okay.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, John?
So I think I actually already went through all that piece. Okay. So the next steps in the process is that there is a significant amount of paperwork that needs to be completed in order for us to be able to do this. So there's some things that Mary Juliana and our physician will be completing. There are some things that I need to complete. So all that paperwork is getting done right now. We are in the process also identifying the support that we're going to need for the testing. There are also going to be permission forms that students and staff will need to complete if they want to be a part of this. There are 2 webinars, two more webinars. We had one last week. One is tomorrow, and that is to go over in more detail the efficacy of the Binax test. And the one on Friday is the actual implementation piece and lessons learned from other school districts. I wish they would have done it in the opposite direction, but they didn't. So Friday is going to be a key webinar so that we can learn more about the logistical pieces on what needs to be done and what are the things that we need to look out for. Once paperwork is in, DESE will notify us what testing company we're going to be using, when to begin the process. We have a district team ready to go, and the timeline is, as I said before, 2 to 3 weeks. I do want to just briefly talk about town vaccine information. Oh, John Parks has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, John. Go ahead.
That's all right. John, have we heard an overall cost on this week over week after all of this rolls out and DESE's coverage stops?
We
Is
do.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. I don't have it off the top of my head, but that was part of the initial information that was given to us.
All right. Can that be shared with the committee at some point so we see what we're looking at it as an overall budget impact?
Once we have a firmer grip of what the impact is going to be, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Because we don't know how many people, how many students and staff are going to want to participate. Obviously,
Yeah.
that's going to factor into this. There's some startup costs, which right now DESE is going to pay for, that we would I don't know if we're going to have to assume. So it's those types of things.
Chuck and John, if you want to, before we move on to the town vaccine, there's one Q&A question regarding the pool testing, or 4 questions in 1 question, I guess, as the case may be.
Sure.
Okay, some of these have been answered, but Mary Ann Downey, 13 Heather Drive. I have a few questions. 1, will staff be participating in the pool testing, as in taking the test like students are taking the tests? I think the answer, John, is if they sign the permission form, yes.
Yes, that is correct. Depending on the level is going to depend on how they're pooled. So, and again, it's also going to depend on which company we get. If we get a company that's going to allow for 10 to 25 samples in a pool, we would do a classroom of students and the staff member for that classroom, for example, at the elementary level together. If we're only allowed 10, then we're going to have to split that classroom with satellite classrooms and strategically do that. And you want to keep that group together throughout the testing weeks. Middle school would look similar. High school is going to be a little bit more challenging because we don't really have a cohort of a class like elementary and middle. So we're looking at different ways that we can do that as effectively as possible.
Okay. Second question, and you've answered this as well, but is parental consent required for students to take the tests? And since there's a form you're sending home, it sounds like the answer to that is yes as well.
Yes. The only group that we are going to require is anyone involved in extracurricular activities and athletics.
Okay. Third part of the question, what if parents of some students do not consent to the test? Does that mean a student cannot attend in person?
Nope, we cannot restrict the students' access to in-person learning if they don't get tested.
But going back to your answer for the last question, it could mean that a student could not participate in extracurricular activities if they do not consent.
That is correct.
Okay. And the last question is, what if a parent consents, but at the time of the test, a child refuses to go along and provide a sample? I think that's probably more applicable at the younger ages.
Yeah, we'll have to look into how we would address that.
Okay. There's another question, but it's not appropriate for this topic yet, Chuck, so we'll hold it until later.
Okay.
So the town has just put up, and that's what you saw on the slides during executive session for those that were watching. So the town has a website on their homepage. They do have a button, I believe it's yellow in color, for vaccine information. There are a couple of slides I just want to, actually one slide I want to show you. So just to put it into perspective of where we are in the vaccination process, Mrs. Dowd and I have been attending command meetings, and every week that this is a topic of conversation, obviously, because we are planning for what will be next steps in this process. So right now, this is phase 1, and your healthcare workers, first responders, home healthcare workers, other healthcare workers doing non-COVID facing care are getting vaccinated. And there is a list on the DPH website in order of priority for phase 1. Phase 2, this is right now, and it has changed a few times. Individuals with 2+ comorbidities and or age 75 would be first in line for phase 2. That is supposed to begin in early to mid-February, followed by anyone involved in early education and K-12 workers, transit, grocery, utility, food and agriculture, etc. So right now, anyone in schools would be second on the list for phase 2, and we are working on that with the town on what that would look like. And then that's going to be February to April, and then April to June would be phase 3. Of course, all of this is dependent on supply. and how much the town is able to get at one time. So we're all working at putting together lists of different groups of people so that when supplies do become available, we're able to quickly get them administered. Most likely, if this is going to be happening in our community, it would be happening on Fridays and over the weekend to administer the vaccines. Just a quick update. Fall 2 sports season. I know we're only halfway through winter, but we have begun having discussions about Fall 2. Looks like that Fall 2 could include, and I say could because these are decisions that would need to be made by both the state, MIAA, and the Middlesex League. So they could include football, indoor track for boys and girls, swimming for boys and girls, volleyball, and am I missing anything? I think that's it. So those are the possible sports that could be in session with Fall 2. Fall 2 is scheduled to begin, according to the MIAA, around February 22nd. The Middlesex League would determine when the exact start date would be. If it's consistent with the other 2 seasons, it would be probably a week or 2 later. And again, what that's going to look like in each sport, we do not know yet, but we have begun having those discussions, and as soon as we have more information, we will be updating the committee on that.
John, is there any update on gymnastics?
In terms of what, Chuck?
They didn't have a place to practice as of last week, right?
Right, and my understanding is I don't believe the Gymnastics Academy is open yet, or they've been having some facility issues. So we are looking into other venues. The tricky part with looking for another venue at this time of year is we're going to need to get into an agreement with venues, making sure they have the proper COVID cleaning plan and liability plan and things like that. So I know that Tom is working on that as we speak. We actually had that conversation today.
Sean?
Thanks, Chuck. John, sorry, just going back to the pooled testing piece. I was just thinking through the ramifications here of Tom's question. If we don't have good compliance with all the folks that were involved in a pool going back and doing the individual tests, you could get a scenario where the individual who triggered the positive test doesn't go through with getting the individual test. What would we then? Do we have a sense of then what we would have to do with that class? Would we have to quarantine the class for 10 days? Like, what would that look like?
So I think what you're asking, Sean, I just want to make sure, is that if a pool comes back positive and not everyone participates in the pool, the reflex, is that what you're?
Not everyone who was in the pool participates in the reflex testing.
Okay. So we would rate, I mean, the results they're only 15-minute waiting time. So we would see who is in the existing pool that did get tested to see if there's any positive results with that. We may have to quarantine, and usually because we're doing this the in-person week, they would be remote the next week anyway, unless it's a high need student. So they would be quarantined for the following week if we couldn't get full participation on the reflex.
Okay.
Because it could be more than one positive test in the pool.
Thank you.
Carla?
John, back along, my question is with the pool test as well. So it sounds like the program financially would be paid for by DESI up until the end of March.
Correct.
Are we under obligation to continue that program at that point in time?
No, we are not.
We're not. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, John.
Thanks. I have one thank you tonight. I try to, I mean, as you know, I've been trying to recognize different groups of people. I felt tonight I needed to recognize one teacher in the district who I've just been amazed at all of the things, and I see her a lot because she's up here at central office a lot doing testing of kids, and that's Flory Johnson. Flory Johnson is our district-wide evaluator, and I know that she has been very involved and very present in our school district during this pandemic. I know this summer she was working with kids. I know that she's been coming in a lot on Fridays to do a lot of the testing that we've been trying to catch up on for our students. If you've ever met Flory, she is such a great person, a very pleasant person, a very positive person. And I just felt that she deserved a shout out for all of the work that she's doing in our district as our district-wide evaluator. She works with literally every elementary school in the district. She meets all kinds of students and she does an amazing job with all of them. So my shout out tonight is for Flory Johnson, who is one of our special educators.
Thank you, John.
And I have a couple of student photos. We have some artwork. This is from the Barrows Elementary School. Beth Hurley is the art teacher at Barrows, and she has been displaying the artwork all over the school, even though we don't have necessarily a full school of kids. But it's great to see, and all of our elementary schools are doing this, in our middle schools and high school. It's great to see student work on the walls throughout all our buildings. So this is some artwork from Barrows. And I'm now going to shift us to Joshua Eaton. This is a student that is doing a presentation on drought. We also have a student that is working with Legos. We have another student at Joshua Eaton that's doing writing. And I've got one last photo, which it involves the food distribution. So I'm gonna let Gail describe the situation, and she also took the photo, so I'll let her.
Hence, I didn't want to be in the photo. So in addition to the great work that's being done in all the classrooms, we continue to do the food distribution. So we were very pleasantly surprised on Friday that we had a few guest helpers. I don't know if they realized they were going to be helpers and put to work as soon as they showed up, but the two SROs and the assistant fire chief showed up on Friday just to check in and see how things were going. And we did check with this family, who is the sweetest family, who they do a walk to us every Friday. So we have a lot of fun with them. So they were very excited to see the two SROs. And I will say it was amazing to see how many kids were jumping out of the cars to say hello to SRO Batcher, who spends a lot of time in the elementary schools. So Danielle Collins did an amazing job. We had Make Your Own Pizza last week, which we got a lot of feedback was a great hit because it was a task families could do together once they received it. And a shout out to the SROs and the fire department for stopping by to check in, and they dove right in and handed out bags and stickers and everything to the kids. So it took a little longer to get through the line because there were a lot of conversations going on, but I think the students really appreciated making additional connections. So we're still trying to look after the whole child with the food distribution as well as making other connections. So it was a fun Friday, and albeit a little cold, but we did have a good time.
Gail, can I
Thank you,
add, we know SRO Vatcher as Officer Matt in our house, and I can attest to his celebrity status among the elementary school set.
Sean, it was adorable to see a couple of cars. I was like, oh great, the first day we have police here, there's going to be a car accident, cars suddenly stopping, windows opening, and they're like, Officer Matt, Officer Matt. So it was a lot of fun, and I think the parents appreciated it, the kids appreciated it. We didn't know they were coming, so it was, and I have to give a shout out to poor Officer Lewis, who there weren't many high school students coming through, so he felt we were trying to give him a little celebrity status, but it definitely went to Officer Matt.
Thank you, Gail.
And that's my report for tonight.
Is there any other questions from the committee on Dr. Doherty's report? And we have, yes, Carla?
Do we have any update on the high school?
No, what I said on Thursday, that I don't have any other updates since Thursday. I believe tomorrow is when the survey closes for the students.
So that's a good lead into the questions in the Q&A, Chuck.
Okay.
So the first one is from Kathy and Joe Bean, 138 Bancroft. As parents of an RMHS student, could you please let us know the plan to get the students back into the classroom? Thank you, Tom Wise, for offering help on 114 as a fresh set of eyes. Have we revisited this offer? What about a third-party independent group to be formed by taxpayers, RMHS parents, led by Tom Wise, with the goal of getting the students back into the school? Could the school committee please vote on this tonight, regardless of pool testing? Since my name's in there, I'll just quickly say, I don't think that's the right thing necessarily at this point in time. I think Dr. Doherty and Mrs. Boynton and the rest of the department heads have demonstrated that they're working through this. The survey that's out there right now is a key input point for that, as we discussed last Thursday. And this leads to the next question and point, and then we can open up for everybody else, which was Kim Shanley, 32 Whitehall Lane. I know that less than half the high school has responded to the survey that was sent last week. Will there be any change to the hybrid plan in third quarter so parents, students know how to respond to the survey? Will the high schoolers potentially be in the 4 days a week as promised? And Dr. Doherty, you have mentioned last Thursday in particular that survey is critical to making sure we know how many children or how many students will be in the school, so we can level the alphabet appropriately to get 9 through 12 in, A through L, and M through Z, or whatever the appropriate level of breakage is from a alphabetic perspective to make that work. And we need parents to respond appropriately to that survey, their desires for being in the hybrid model, in that 4-day model, essentially. We can't guarantee it, right?
Right.
But that's being worked on, and that's a key input appropriately.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And there's one more thing that came in just now, is from Diane Nastis, 50 Victoria Avenue. Is it legal to mandate any child to be tested?
Is it legal to be? No, you can't. If they're involved in athletics and extracurricular, yes.
Yeah, you already answered that in your presentation.
I just received a text from Mrs. Boynton. So far, 450 families have responded, and they absolutely need the data in order to determine the model.
Yeah, so we want those parents to respond, right?
Yes.
That's key to getting this, figured out. So those parents that are watching, and we know there are many based on past, conversations as well, get to your networks and ask your friends to make sure they respond to that survey with the intention and point of That number is critical for us to figure out how we can get the kids back into the high school 4 days a week instead of 4 days a month. 4 days
Carl?
every other week, correction. 4 days every other week as opposed to 4 days a month.
Is there any way, Dr. Doherty, is there any way for that test to be, or that survey to be quote unquote administered during A block tomorrow? I know that with the previous survey in middle schools, they allowed the students time to answer a survey question. So I'm just wondering if they, if the high school would allow
I
students.
believe this survey is for families. It's not for the student, whereas the last one was for students. We asked specifically student opinion
Yeah,
on that survey. This, we want to know from families, what is the commitment? What are they committing for third quarter for their child? What model?
okay. So I guess it sounds like potentially every family who hasn't responded needs to be reached out to.
That's over 800 families.
Yeah,
I would be happy to help if you need help with that effort. If the high school needs help, I'd be happy to help with that effort.
John?
First of all, John, thank you for getting that survey out. Can we send a reminder out where it's closing tomorrow? Can we just push a reminder out quickly saying, could you please?
I can ask Mrs. Boynton to do that. Yes.
Okay. Even if she does, I don't want to go into her time. She's off for the evening. She should be off for the evening. If she can push it out
She
when she gets
just
into school.
responded to me. Yes, she will send out a reminder.
Oh. There we go.
Aaron?
So I already did my survey, so I don't remember if how it was worded. If somebody doesn't do the survey, is there a default? Like, we assume the student will stay on the same path they were on second quarter?
I honestly don't know, Erin. I haven't been. This is being, the high school is, this is a high school survey. It's not a district survey, and Mrs. Boynton is the one that's been spearheading it.
Okay. Thanks.
We have one more question as well, Chuck.
Yeah.
Kim Shanley, 32 Whitehall Lane. So the 4 day a week would be an alpha split, not by grade. That's not what we were promised in August.
I don't have an answer to that because, again, we need the numbers before we can figure out what we can do.
Is it, sorry, Chuck.
Yeah.
Is it reasonable to assume at the current time, John, that if we, and maybe Kate is the right one to answer, or Mrs. Boynton, sorry, is the right one to answer, that if we get to a expected number of hybrid students that would require a satellite model that we had previously discussed, but we don't have the satellite paras to do that, that we would then go to the A to Z model as a backup to get kids in the schools more frequently than they currently are.
Yeah, I would rather have Mrs. Boynton.
Okay.
I don't want to commit to something that, you know, I know that her staff is working on this. They are reaching out to every family is what I've been told.
Okay.
The ones that haven't filled out the survey.
Is there any other questions?
There are no more in the Q&A.
Okay, well, thank you, John.
Thank you.
So just one other thing that I want to talk about on future business. So it's going to get busy here over the next couple weeks. The search committee is going to finalize their recommendations on the 27th, which is Wednesday, and announce to us on Thursday, the 28th. We, by the way, are meeting at 7:30 on the 28th, not 7, because Dorothy needs to do that, and she's not available until 7:30. So from there, so let me just, so we, based on our conversation, I know you weren't at the meeting, Aaron, based on our conversation on Thursday night, we had a quorum of the committee that was willing to meet, do our interviews of the candidates in person, socially distance, all of that. We're still kind of figuring out the venue. For those that don't want to do it, or don't feel comfortable, I should say, doing it remotely, I mean, in person, as long as we have 4 that is a quorum that are in person, we can remote in the remaining 2 and they can vote. So we can all vote. If it goes more than 2, then we just can't, we'd have to just stay remote. As of Thursday, we had 4, I believe. And I didn't know what year, but you don't have to say one way or the other right now, but whatever your position is on that. So the plan was to do those interviews in person. The site visits would still remain remote, and the community forum would remain remote. So with that as the backdrop, we tried to put together a calendar of the events and the days. So Tom, you had typed, can you share that screen?
Yep, coming up now. Okay, everybody should be able to see it now.
Whoa.
There's a bit of an echo coming out of you, Chuck, I think.
No, I said it's can everyone
tiny.
read that?
It's tiny. It's 130% on this side, so I'll make it bigger. Is that better for everybody?
Yep.
So just going across the top, we have the date, the purpose of the meeting, when time it'll start, in particular focused on public meetings. If there's an interview in that time, what is the interview time slot? The end time of the meeting, if we have a target, who's involved in the meeting appropriately, whether it's an official public meeting and we're posting appropriately, whether it's a public or private Zoom meeting as necessary as well. So going down from the top, the first meeting is the one next, or this coming Thursday, where we're notified, and we would be involving ourselves, Dorothy, the search committee, Carrie, and Samantha.
Right.
That would be an official public meeting. The rest of central office staff does not need to attend as necessary, and that would be a public, it's going to be Teams in that case as opposed to Zoom, I think is what we finally agreed. Then we have.
So just one other on that meeting. So as Tom said, Dorothy, and we will invite or send the link to the search committee so they can attend if they'd like to through that. And but we're going to ask the chair of the search committee to present with Dorothy. So sorry, Tom.
Nope, no problem. Then going forward, we have essentially 5 days for site visits between ourselves and the candidates. So Chuck and I have discussed or asked whether we could do like a morning and an afternoon to kind of consolidate it to 3 days or 2 days for ourselves. That's kind of in progress, but as it is right now, we've put placeholders out there for February 4th, February 5th, February 8th, February 9th, and February 10th. And when we do our site visit, we'll meet with the counterparties, principals in central office, teachers, peers, hopefully some selected students, the school committee or school board, depending upon the person involved, and municipal officer officials of the candidate. So we'll have a slate essentially. It's important to note that is not a public meeting. We cannot deliberate. We cannot talk about the results in that meeting. So we just are listening and asking, we'll ask a question, listen, and take notes. That's it. We cannot deliberate. So that will be private. Then we will have the candidates meeting with our principals, the central office, RTA representatives. Those will be more private closed meetings. There will be a teacher meet and greet. So it's private because it's teachers, but it'll be more broad. Selected students meet and greet. The town manager will have a kind of a one-on-one meeting with the person or people, and we'll have a broad, wide open set of community meet and greet type Zoom meeting for the candidate to attend as well. So everybody will get a chance. Each case, we're going to ask for SurveyMonkey surveys to be filled out to provide feedback from the site visits. It's a little bit of a harder situation being in the COVID space than we are, where we would generally have somebody working around or walking around with them and getting more feedback in more real time. In this case, we're going to have to take the SurveyMonkey feedback approach. The only one of those meetings that would be public is the community meeting. And we may or may not attend depending upon our availability of that as a public meeting. So that continues down for each of the different days that are out there. And then what we wanted to do is from a school committee official meeting perspective and the official interview perspective is, excuse me, we didn't want to do it across 5 nights and take, RCTV and take the IT staff that support us and all that stuff. So we felt it was more appropriate to try to consolidate it down to 2 nights. And so for the time being right now, not knowing how many candidates will come back, we've asked for between 3 and 5 as a reminder. We're targeting that Monday, the 8th, for a 3 interview night. And those the three candidates that have gone through the site visits would be the candidates we would interview that night. And then we would target Wednesday the 10th as a 2 candidate night. As our 5 candidates that we would be doing interviews for. Those would be fully public meetings. We do allow for some time here for a little bit of deliberation in between. It's public, so we can discuss how much we want to do in that, but we followed a very similar model in the private side of things from a selection committee perspective. And then the last meeting, and then I see there's questions, would be the decision meeting, which is the 11th of February, at which point we make a choice and decide who we'd like to offer the position contingent upon negotiations of the contract.
And I've spoken to Colby, and she is going to give us a draft. I got to give her some information on compensation and stuff, but she's going to give us a draft of a contract so that we'll have that to talk about. Not on the 11th, but very shortly thereafter, we'll have a meeting to discuss that. Sean, did you have a question?
Yeah, so this is very thorough, Tom, so thanks for putting this together. A couple of questions. One is these 5 days, is the assumption that each candidate would have their own day basically, and they'd go through all, okay. And then the feedback.
Sorry, not everybody can see me nodding, so the answer to that question is yes.
Oh yeah, sorry, good call. And then so the feedback that's collected, all these, with SurveyMonkey references, presumably that feedback is provided to us in some form. The question that I have about that is, I'm thinking about the 3rd candidate and the 5th candidate in particular. Is there any scenario where they are disadvantaged by us receiving the feedback essentially in real time as their interview is taking place? Like the other candidates, there's potentially a day in between when we receive that feedback and when we interview them. And I'm just thinking through, are we going to feel as prepared to ask the right questions in a particular interview, absent the feedback, absent that time to chew on the feedback?
So I'll take, go ahead, Chuck, you want to answer
Go
first?
ahead.
I was gonna say, I'll take
so that-
go ahead.
That did come up, and it's kind of one of the perils of the scenario we're in. But Dorothy did say that, in a normal time, any given candidate could end up doing all of that in one day, so that a school committee didn't necessarily have time to mull over the answers. But I don't know if that made sense, but Tom?
I'll add to that is that one of the things that we'll be talking about on Thursday that Dorothy will walk us through essentially is the question selection process, right? So we're not forming questions on the day of the interview necessarily. We will be going through a set of questions, and Dorothy will walk us through this on Thursday in more detail. She'll give samples. We can come up with our own. We can look through the stuff that came out of the public survey that was done back in November, and we will set up essentially a slate of questions that we will figure out.
Same ones of every candidate.
Got it. Okay. So similar to the site visits in that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Understood.
And one of the things Dorothy also pointed out is it's up to the ethics of the candidates to make sure they're not watching all the meetings, so that they know the questions ahead of time. Essentially, right? That is a point of emphasis there, that because I was asking that question. Does that mean that the person on the 4th or 5th interview would know all the questions? And it's an ethical thing that they're not watching the meetings to know the questions ahead of time. Now, whether we'll ever be able to determine that is a whole nother conversation, but that's the hope and expectation that the interviews, while they're public, the other candidates will not be watching them to know what the questions are ahead of time. We may also, and what we've done with the selection committee essentially, is we have a basic slate of 10 or 14 questions, and then we have 1 or 2 that are specific to the candidate. So what we might end up doing is the same basic slate, and then we'll add 1 or 2 that are candidate specific based upon feedback from the selection committee or based upon our own reviews of the packets that we'll receive. Does that help, Sean?
It does. Thank you.
Aaron?
So I just wanted to get a little clarification. So let's say candidate A is slated for Thursday, the 4th, to do all of that, right? Are we saying by the evening of the 4th, we'll have the aggregate SurveyMonkey feedback? Because otherwise that candidate on the 8th, like when will we get the aggregate SurveyMonkey in comparison to when we have to interview them? Will we have all of that before the interview?
I think the answer.
Go ahead.
The answer is we shouldn't expect to have that before the interview necessarily. That's what Chuck was essentially saying, is that if they were visiting on site, you may not have all the feedback yet before their interview anyway. It's more of a piece of information that we should expect before we go into Thursday, to say if there's anything in there that is a huge red flag, that tilts one of our opinions or decisions. We might have a time to. I'm not going to say that. I think that we should think of it as a final bit of feedback for us on our way into Thursday from a deliberation perspective, because there's no guarantee about what time we'll get that those SurveyMonkey results.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the SurveyMonkey results are to be used for us to evaluate, what other people thought of the candidate, what their value judgments were, and not necessarily to be used for our crafting of questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just too bad, because I feel like it would potentially influence if there are certain areas where we wanted to dig deeper with a candidate, but And then my other clarification, which I think you just said this, Tom, but I assume we will be able to do some off the cuff questions in these finalist interviews. Is that, I know we'll do the same thing that, I'm on the screening committee, so I know we'll do the same thing that the screening committee is doing, but there has to be a way to have some candidate specific questions. So do you anticipate we would submit those in advance, similar to the way the screening committee is doing it?
I think my understanding of the process is we would submit the candidate specific questions in advance, so we have the slate ahead of time. Okay. But one other thing for us to be aware of is we do have the option to do follow-up questions on an answer as well. And so we may have a base, a primary question, right? And depending upon how they answer, we may have a follow-up question as a result of the answer. So that's another thing for us to consider. Ultimately, that's up to the chair, as he, in this case, is running the interview. We have allocated 75 minutes for that interview, which is slightly more than we allocated for the selection committee interviews. So we should be able to get to a little bit more depth there. And the other thing we have to remember is we will come in with more information from our own site visits. Right, so we're talking about their site visit here and getting the SurveyMonkey, but we will also have done the site visits to them, or at least some subset of us will have, that will come in with some information from that we can figure out if we want to craft or adjust the last one or two questions that are candidate specific appropriately.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point, because that's another area where, quote unquote, last minute information might arise that we want to dig deeper on. Can I ask a question about if I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of us doing these in person. So I'm willing to attend in person. That's not part of my question, but what does that mean? I don't think you were clear on Thursday night what that meant for public. Like, do we have to open for the public?
You're right. I wasn't clear. I have since conferred with, at the direction of the committee, I've conferred with Dorothy as well as Colby Brunt about what in terms of we can do with the public. And they both told me that we can be in person. The public, we can just. That's what they will have done at their community session. So as long as we're live streaming it, that satisfies the public requirement.
Good point. I was thinking they might still have some questions, but that's not the format here. So thank you.
The one other point I'll make that I don't think I made before is it is entirely possible that when the selection committee provides the 3 to 5 candidates, that they also provide a set of here's what we'd like you to follow up on, or here's the things that might need the most follow up from a question perspective that might feed into our questions that we ask in the finalists. Doesn't mean we have to, but that is input that we can also consider as part of the question creation process. Say that fast 3 times.
One other thing that I mentioned on Thursday night, and I'll say it again, is, and once the selection or search committee has gotten the 3 to 5 candidates, Dorothy is going to be calling them the next, or that night, or the next morning, or whatever. And she will, at that point, put out to them that the committee is going to do this in person. If for some reason somebody can't or isn't comfortable doing that, then we're back to remote everything, because as I said, the other night. I want it to be a level playing field, and if for some reason a person can't do a public interview, I don't want them to be remote and everybody else public. Unless the committee strongly disagrees with me on that, that's my feeling. I think it needs to be, the same for everybody. So, Carla?
Great, thank you. Tom, are you going to send us out a copy of that schedule or post it somewhere so we can?
It'll be in the packet for Thursday, I believe, is the plan right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't send it to you other than that.
It will be in our January 28th packet.
Okay,
Right.
and then can you just explain to me that initial line at the top of everybody, their site visits, and it included administration and school committee and all that. What is to happen? That's a question and answer period, but for school committee, are we to ask questions or are we just there to listen at that point?
Which one are you referring to, Tom? Can you pull that up again? Sorry.
Yep. She's referring to our site visits.
So our site visits is, yes, we would have an opportunity to, I've done these, I did this for other central office people. Well, we did one last fall, last June, I believe, or May or something. And it's an opportunity for us to ask questions of where the person works now, of the individuals listed up there. I haven't, I don't know that we will put together any standardized questions. I'll have to talk to Dorothy. Is that what you were getting at? What we're going to ask them? Or?
So these site visits are us visiting them, so to speak.
Yes.
The first line, correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So
Thank
I
you.
don't know whether, I'll have to talk to Dorothy about that. I don't know whether those are pre-arranged questions or whether we just have an open dialogue and ask questions. I'll have to find that out.
Okay.
I think the intent will be generally prearranged, so you're getting the same
Yeah.
information from each candidate's location as much as possible. And again, to the same point, we can always ask follow-up questions. We can always ask candidate-specific questions. But generally, we're trying to achieve the same pieces of information throughout the entire process for all candidates.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
We have, if we're done with that, Chuck, we have a bunch of, at least, well, 2 questions, I guess, from the live Q&A.
Okay. Is everybody done with that? So more to come. It is an ambitious schedule. I said that this morning, and Dorothy assured me that it's ambitious, right? But it will get done. So our faith is in that. So.
Okay. So the Q&A, there's 2 questions or one question or 2 statements actually. Kim Shanley, 32 Whitehall Lane. It's incredibly difficult to fill out a survey when you don't know the plan. And then Diane Nassis of 50 Victoria Avenue. These 2 pictures are directly from the CDC website. It doesn't appear mandating testing is allowed. And then there's 2 pictures that we can't see because the file doesn't come through via this platform, but maybe Ms. Nassis can send us an email with those pictures.
We did check with legal counsel. We are allowed to mandate testing for athletics and extracurricular activities.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
And I guess, I mean, just going back to the last one, Chuck, if you don't mind, we we really want them to fill it out as though they are intending for their student to be in school more. Whether we can achieve that is another question, but that's the intention in asking the question in the first place from the last couple of meetings. John, I hope I'm not overstepping by stating that, but I think that's the understanding
No.
we had from last Thursday.
No, you're not. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Is there anything else? The motion? Thank you, John, for everything tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
For a second,
Second,
Sean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Carla,
aye.
Aaron,
I.
Aye.
Chuck, I. Thank you, everybody. For
Everybody. Have a good night.
participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.
Have a good night.
Good night.